The sands of the Nile hide countless secrets, but none are as powerful as the stories of Egypt's ancient wars. For over 1,000 years, pharaohs rose and fell, kingdoms clashed, and empires were forged in blood and fire. From Kamose's defiance against foreign invaders to Ramses II's legendary stand at Kadesh, every battle left its mark on the destiny of an ancient civilization. This is the untold saga of pharaohs, soldiers, and strategies that shaped the ancient world. Prepare to march through time as we uncover the epic wars that made Egypt a superpower and the conflicts that began its fall. Chapter 1: Kamose. The defiance against the Hyksos Egypt in the 17th dynasty was a shadow of its former self. Foreign rulers, known as the Hyksos, controlled the fertile delta, while native Egyptian kings clung to Thebes in the south. Among these kings rose Kamose, a fierce warrior with an unyielding spirit. He refused to accept Egyptian submission and vowed to reclaim the lands stolen by foreign invaders. His fiery speeches stirred Thebes into rebellion, and his name became a symbol of resistance. In 1555 BCE, Kamose led daring raids into Hyksos-controlled territories, striking at their supply lines and disrupting their armies. Though vastly outnumbered, he used the Nile as his ally, launching swift attacks by boat and disappearing before the Hyksos could retaliate. His victories were small in scale but monumental in meaning. Kamose had awakened Egypt's spirit of war after decades of humiliation. But Kamose's life was cut short. He fell before he could deliver the final blow to the Hyksos. Yet his defiance planted the seeds of freedom. His younger brother Ahmose would inherit not just his throne, but his dream of liberation. Kamose became immortal in the memory of Egypt, remembered as the first spark in the long war for national revival. Chapter 2: Ahmose I, the pharaoh who reclaimed Egypt. Ahmose I ascended the throne, determined to finish what Kamose began. Unlike his brother, Ahmose wielded both brilliant strategy and unyielding patience. He understood that defeating the Hyksos required more than raids. It demanded a full-scale war. He rebuilt the Egyptian army, training archers, equipping chariots, and forging alliances with Nubia to secure southern borders. With his forces ready, Ahmose launched a relentless campaign on the Hyksos capital of Avaris. The siege lasted months, with brutal street fighting, fire assaults, and the choking smoke of burning defenses. Ahmose's armies encircled the city, cutting off every escape route until the Hyksos surrendered. Egypt had triumphed. Ahmose's victory marked the beginning of the New Kingdom, an age of unparalleled power and expansion. No longer content with survival, Egypt turned outward. Its armies prepared to secure dominance across the Near East and Nubia. The liberation of Egypt was only the beginning. Now, an empire would rise. Chapter 3: The Rise of the New Kingdom. Under Ahmose and his successors, Egypt transformed from a fractured kingdom into a centralized, militarized superpower. The scars of Hyksos rule left the pharaohs determined never to allow foreign domination again. Vast resources were poured into building a professional army equipped with chariots, composite bows, and bronze weapons, the tools of empire. Egypt expanded south into Nubia, seizing gold mines and securing trade routes along the Nile in the north. Egyptian influence stretched into Canaan, where fortified garrisons ensured loyalty from vassal states. The once isolated kingdom now wielded power across 3 continents, standing shoulder to shoulder with Mesopotamia's great empires. Yet, With expansion came conflict. The Near East was a patchwork of competing powers, and Egypt's growing dominance drew envy and resistance. The stage was set for an era of almost continuous war, battles that would produce Egypt's greatest generals and its most legendary kings. Chapter 4. Thutmose I, Pharaoh of Conquest. Thutmose I inherited a throne secured by Ahmose's victories, but sought to carve his own name into history. He turned Egypt's gaze northward, launching campaigns deep into Syria and Canaan. His armies marched farther than any Egyptian before him, crossing the Euphrates River and planting Egypt's banners where no pharaoh had ever dared. In Nubia, Thutmose crushed rebellions with overwhelming force. His policy was clear: absolute control over conquered lands. Fortresses were built, garrisons established, and native leaders replaced with loyal governors. Egypt became more than a kingdom. It became a military machine designed to maintain an empire. Thutmose I's campaigns laid the foundation for Egypt's imperial dominance. Yet while his conquests expanded Egypt's reach, they also brought it into conflict with rising powers in the Near East. The age of isolated victories was ending. Soon, Egypt would face coalitions determined to challenge its supremacy. Chapter 5. Hatshepsut and the Calm Before the Storm. After Thutmose I's death, Egypt entered a period of stability under his daughter, Hatshepsut, one of history's few female pharaohs. Hatshepsut shifted Egypt's focus from war to wealth. She prioritized trade over conquest, opening lucrative routes to Punt and flooding Egypt with exotic goods, ivory, incense, and gold. Temples rose across the Nile Valley, and the grandeur of her reign brought Egypt cultural prestige unmatched by any rival. But beneath the prosperity, tensions brewed. Vassal states in Canaan tested Egypt's patience, emboldened by years without military campaigns. Rebellion simmered quietly at the empire's edges. When Hatshepsut died, power passed to Thutmose III, her stepson, a man who had waited decades for the throne and carried a grudge against her policies. Egypt's armies would march again, and this time they would march farther than ever before. Chapter 6. Thutmose III. The warrior pharaoh, Thutmose III, often called the Napoleon of ancient Egypt, inherited an empire in need of strength. For 2 decades, he had waited patiently under Hatshepsut's shadow, but once crowned, he unleashed the full might of Egypt's armies. Vassal states in Canaan rebelled, believing Egypt had grown soft. They underestimated the warrior king who now wore the crown. In 1457 BCE, Thutmose III faced a powerful coalition of Canaanite princes at the Battle of Megiddo. Choosing an unexpected route through a narrow mountain pass, he risked everything on speed and surprise. His gamble worked. The enemy, caught unprepared, fled in chaos, leaving Megiddo to Egyptian hands. This victory marked the beginning of 17 successful campaigns that extended Egypt's reach from Nubia in the south to the Euphrates in the north. Egypt stood at its zenith, its coffers overflowing with tribute, its borders secured by fear and respect. Under Thutmose III, Egypt became the greatest power of the ancient Near East. Chapter 7. Amenhotep II and the Empire's Security. When Amenhotep II succeeded his father, he inherited not just an empire, but the responsibility to defend it. The vassal states, cowed under Thutmose III, began testing Egypt's resolve. Rebellions erupted in Syria, forcing Amenhotep to prove his military prowess early in his reign. He crushed uprisings swiftly, capturing thousands of prisoners and displaying them in Egypt to remind all of his strength. His campaigns reasserted Egyptian dominance and ensured that tribute continued to flow from conquered lands. Unlike his father, Amenhotep preferred harsh displays of power to diplomacy. Yet, beneath Egypt's military success, cracks were forming. The growing wealth and complacency of the elite sowed seeds of division. The empire remained vast, but maintaining it required constant vigilance, and a future pharaoh would neglect that duty. Chapter 8: Amenhotep IV Akhenaten and the Empire's Weakening. When Amenhotep IV, later known as Akhenaten, took the throne, he was less a warrior and more a visionary. Obsessed with religious reform, he abandoned Egypt's traditional gods in favor of the Aten, the sun disk. His devotion to a single deity consumed his reign and alienated the powerful priesthood of Amen. Akhenaten built a new capital at Amarna, turning Egypt's gaze inward while its enemies strengthened. Vassal states in Canaan and Syria begged for aid as rival empires pressed against Egyptian borders. But Akhenaten ignored their pleas. The empire's armies stood idle as Egypt's influence crumbled abroad. By the time of Akhenaten's death, Egypt was militarily weakened and politically fractured. His successors inherited a kingdom vulnerable to both internal unrest and external threats. The stage was set for foreign powers to challenge Egypt's supremacy once more. Chapter 9: Tutankhamun and the struggle to rebuild. The boy king Tutankhamun, only 9 years old when crowned, reversed Akhenaten's radical reforms. Under the guidance of his advisors, the old gods were restored, temples rebuilt, and the capital returned to Thebes. But while Egypt regained its spiritual foundation, its military power remained fragile. Hittite expansion into Syria threatened Egyptian holdings, and rebellious vassal states sensed weakness. Egyptian generals launched limited campaigns, but these were defensive at best. The empire that once dominated the Near East was now fighting to preserve its borders. Tutankhamun's reign was short, and his sudden death at 18 plunged Egypt into uncertainty once again. While he restored Egypt's faith, he lacked the time and strength to restore its dominance, a task left for future kings. Chapter 10: Horemheb and the Return of Order. After Tutankhamun, the throne briefly passed to Ai, but it was Horemheb, a seasoned general, who finally seized control. Determined to erase the chaos of the Amarna period, Horemheb restored discipline to Egypt's government and military. He strengthened the army, rebuilt garrisons, and punished corruption severely. While Horemheb's campaign stabilized Egypt's frontiers, his focus was on consolidating power internally. He dismantled Akhenaten's reforms completely, reinstating the supremacy of Amen's priesthood and returning Egypt to its traditional foundations. By the time of his death, Egypt was stable once more, but still faced looming threats. To the north, the Hittite Empire had grown into a formidable rival. A new dynasty would rise to meet them on the battlefield, one led by kings born to wage war. Chapter 11: Seti I, the road to Kadesh. Seti I, founder of the 19th dynasty, revived Egypt's military ambitions. He launched aggressive campaigns into Canaan and Syria, clashing repeatedly with Hittite forces as the two empires vied for control of strategic trade routes. Seti recaptured key cities and fortified Egyptian positions in the Levant. But Seti knew that war with the Hittites was inevitable. Both powers sought dominance over the same lands, and neither was willing to yield. The seeds of one of history's greatest battles were planted during his reign. Seti's policies laid the groundwork for his son's legendary campaigns. That son, Ramses II, would lead Egypt into one of its most famous confrontations, the Battle of Kadesh, a clash that would test Egypt's military strength like never before. Chapter 12: Ramses II and the Battle of Kadesh. In 1274 BCE, Ramses II, known as Ramses the Great, marched north to face the Hittites at Kadesh, near modern-day Syria. Confident in victory, Ramses divided his army into 4 divisions, but Hittite spies lured him into a trap. The Hittite chariots struck with devastating force, nearly overwhelming Ramses' position. At the height of the chaos, Ramses rallied his troops personally, charging into battle and turning the tide. Egyptian reinforcements arrived just in time to prevent total defeat. The battle ended in a stalemate, but Ramses immortalized it as a grand victory, carving his exploits onto temple walls. The clash at Kadesh became one of the most detailed battles in ancient history and marked the beginning of the first recorded peace treaty between 2 great powers. Chapter 13: Ramses II, the Pharaoh of Monuments. Ramses II's reign lasted over 6 decades, making him one of Egypt's longest-ruling pharaohs. Beyond Kadesh, he launched campaigns into Nubia and Libya, expanding Egypt's influence and securing vital resources. His rule marked the height of Egyptian wealth and cultural splendor. Ramses commissioned colossal monuments and temples, including the awe-inspiring Abu symbol and the Ramseum, ensuring his name would echo through eternity. Under his leadership, Egypt became a beacon of power, prestige, and artistry unmatched by any rival. Yet beneath the grandeur, Egypt's military dominance waned. The Hittites remained strong, and Egypt's resources were strained by monumental construction and constant warfare. Ramses left a legacy of glory, but also the seeds of decline. Chapter 14: The twilight of the new kingdom. After Ramses II's death, Egypt entered a period of gradual weakening. Successive pharaohs lacked his charisma and strength, while external threats grew ever stronger. To the west, Libyan tribes pushed into Egyptian territories. To the east, the Sea Peoples descended upon the Mediterranean world. The climactic battles against the Sea Peoples strained Egypt's armies and drained its treasury. Though Egypt repelled the invasions, the cost was devastating. Trade routes collapsed, vassal states broke away, and Egypt's borders shrank. The empire that had once ruled the Near East was now retreating into itself. The Golden Age was ending, replaced by an era of survival. Egypt's military power, once unchallenged, was fading into history. Chapter 15: Legacy of Pharaohs and Warriors. From Kamose's defiance to Ramses' glory, the wars of ancient Egypt defined its destiny. Each battle forged a new path, from liberation to empire, from dominance to decline. The Nile had witnessed centuries of triumph and tragedy, of victories celebrated in stone and defeats whispered in shadows. Egypt's warriors left behind more than monuments. They reshaped diplomacy, perfected chariot warfare, and recorded their struggles for future generations. Through hieroglyphs, temples, and artifacts, their voices echo across millennia, telling the story of a civilization both fragile and eternal. Though Egypt would never again rise to its former heights, its history remains immortal. The pharaohs may have passed into legend, but their battles carved humanity's first chapters of power, ambition, and survival into the desert sands. The winds of time have buried their names beneath the sands, but their stories remain eternal. Kamose, Ahmose, Thutmose, Ramses, each fought not just for empire, but for legacy. And as the Nile still flows, so too does the memory of Egypt's warriors. If you enjoyed this epic journey through ancient history, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the past still has secrets waiting to be uncovered.